In Hakuba, having a vegetable garden is not really thought of as an option so much as an expectation. Most everyone that we come across here in town has one, and anyone you talk to has a much better idea of how to grow edible things out of the ground than we do. Even my son has been indoctrinated, casually walking along the road and pointing out which flowers taste sweet or which grasses you can chew on. This from a kid who just a year ago refused to eat anything green at all. Last year, we got 9 large planters free from Justin, a longtime Hakuba resident and property manager here. We didn't have a house yet, and certainly not a garden, but I stashed those planters away in the crawl space of the rental unit, and when spring came, I pulled them out. Turns out they were pretty deep, and the bags of soil that we'd purchased would never be enough to fill them. But we also had some bags of sawdust from the house build. I knew that you could compost the sawdust, and that is where my logic started to break down. I reasoned that if you could compost sawdust, maybe you could just put soil on top of it and skip the composting part. I know anyone watching this who is a serious or even casual gardener is slapping their forehead right now. But in my defense, maybe hindsight isn't quite 20/20. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What I did was fill the planters half full of sawdust and then half full of planting soil. That made our soil 50% cheaper. This year we were a bit late to the home center and many of the garden plants were already sold. But there were some nice kabocha Japanese pumpkin plants, some cabbage, lettuce, tomato, corn, and Japanese cucumber plants, all for about half price or better. There were even some watermelon plants. We bought them all, and that night, after dark, we planted them. The after dark part wasn't really part of the plan, but the days were still pretty short in May. A couple of days after the transplanting, as the plants really seemed to start thriving in their new environment, I checked the internet. And there it was, in black and white pixels, a clear warning not to use sawdust as planting material. It would steal nitrogen from the plants, as nitrogen is required for plants and required to break down sawdust. Well, what's done is done. But to be honest, here we are in July and our garden has been chugging away. We lost 1 lettuce plant and 1 Japanese shiso plant, but the rest have been going strong since that evening of nocturnal planting. We try to keep the garden watered, but mostly Mother Nature has been handling that. The lettuce was the first plant to provide a yield, and we made bean burritos with that lettuce. The broccoli matured next, but we didn't know how long to wait, so we waited a bit too long. It seems that broccoli will flower if left too long. Don't wait for that. Pick it before the flowers and yeah, it'll taste better. Then it was time for my next mistake. I had heard that the leaves on a tomato vine would actually hurt the flowers and fruit. I know, I heard wrong. And I misunderstood the advice I was getting from the real gardeners when I went in the garden and pulled most of the leaves off the tomato plants. Yes, I know I have since learned that while some believe that thinning a tomato plant is a good idea, pulling off all the leaves can make it overheat and dry out quickly. So I won't do that again. But the gods took pity on me and the plants didn't die. Now, despite the poor plant's hardships, there are several ripening tomatoes on the plant. So we'll see. In the meantime, we also harvested a couple of Japanese cucumbers, and the Japanese kabocha squash is doing amazingly well. I can't wait for the watermelon to start taking shape. It's been a really tough year and a tough job for those plants, working hard to make me into a gardener, but they're doing it. And my thumb, while still mostly brown, is just starting to get a little green sprout on it. Which, come to think of it, is not a very attractive image.